people pleasers very often are not very sticky in relationships. They're not memorable, right? You don't have a lot of these people. One of the things I've said recently that's been really powerful for people is that you're always welcome, but you're never invited. And it's just such a powerful distinction. And the reason that's true, you're always welcome because you're gonna contribute, right? But you're never invited because nobody knows who the hell you are.
There's no depth. There's
Right,
no depth of the relationship. At the end of the day,
right,
what happens when you're focused just on giving someone what you think they want, you're not spending any time sharing anything that you actually want, so nobody
right,
knows who the hell you are, right?
right,
Isn't that part of the challenge?
right. Um, and it's this inauthentic way of being that causes us as humans, or as people pleasing humans, to never also understand who we are, right? So if I
Right.
don't know who I am, how are you going to know who I am? Also, in that vein, if I don't know who I am and you don't know who I am, how does anybody know what my needs are? So when you put it in the context of that, it's like, oh wow, okay, maybe this is an unfair way to treat other people too, right?
Well, I think a good relationship starts with giving of yourself to somebody in an authentic way, right? And the more authentic we are, the more we open up ourselves and have the true self conversations, the more someone either likes you or doesn't like you. I,
Right,
I did a video the other day about parenting, and it was talking about accountability and the lack of discipline and some of these things. And a couple people came back and were like, "Hey, this is really going to piss some people off, huh?" And I was like, "Why? If it does, that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's what I believe. I'm not
right,
trying to adjust myself or my beliefs or what I've seen to be successful so that I help someone else feel good about their mistakes and their
right,
disasters that they want me to actually look at and say, well, it isn't all that bad. No, it's awful. And if we're honest with each other, we build good friendships based on truth, fact, and honesty. And I think it takes a little bit of vulnerability and authenticity to get there. And what you're describing is this shallow, kind of in theory selfless, but in action selfish, right? I
right,
mean, that's the difference.
right. So it's there's this thing that exists in that world, and I talk about it sometimes around transactional relationships. And the reason the relationships are transactional is because you are a transactional person, and it's and it's really complicated. But it's actually not very complicated. It's actually a pretty simple formula, but it's a really hard thing to execute on the back end to fix, right? And what I mean by transactional is like you give to get acceptance and love. So if your relationships feel like they're transactional, it's because you've made them transactional. It's and everyone that I say that to goes, "Well, I'm not the transactional person. They take from me," and I go, "No, you choose to give, and you do it for a reason. Everything we do, we choose, and it's a really, really painful realization. It's like you've chosen your life to this point, right?" And somebody will say, "Well, I didn't choose to have an abusive husband." Okay, great, but you chose to stay, right? I didn't choose to have a girlfriend that cheated on me multiple times. Yeah, but you chose to stay, right? And those things really matter. And the unfortunate news is that at the end of the day, we are all accountable for how we've lived our lives. We are responsible for how this thing turns out. And so, and the people pleaser generally goes, "This is interesting, is that there's an arc, right? So it starts out as like I'm a people pleaser, and that's really in childhood, and then from there we kind of arc to the middle where we're like super pleasing, and then the resentment starts to grow, and then we become angry. And that's where I hear on my channel, it's like, well, I don't like anybody anymore, I'm just gonna be alone. Okay. You do you.
I think
Yeah.
it's natural to go through that progression though, and it's natural to kind of I think people go through the progressions in different parts of their lives. So you
Mhm.
might actually attain a higher level of success in your relationships outside of your family but inside your family, you may still be serving in that people pleasing role. And
Right.
so a lot of times, and they're like, "Oh, I can't even stand to be around my family." And it's because you haven't actually given your family who you are or what you stand
Right.
for. And I think something else you said that was really interesting and that I often think is about how selfish giving can feel, how good giving can feel. If you're giving without expectation, it's one of the most amazing feelings in the world because you've
Hmm.
given of yourself or you've given something you have and it's amazing. But man, it feels so good when it works the right way.
Right.
And that takes a long time. It took me a long time to get there, because
Sure.
I didn't come from a life of excess. We had enough. We had a lot of love, a lot of experiences, a lot of great family,
Sure.
but it wasn't like I was starving to create a life where I had extra, where I had the ability to provide my family or my children more than I had growing up. All the things that you couldn't do, you want to give to them. And so in a short period of time, you're kind of chasing those things. Then you start to share it because there's two reasons. You know you should,
Hmm.
and you feel blessed. Maybe you even feel guilty to some extent that you got out and other people didn't. And so you're
Hmm.
doing all this stuff and you're giving with expectation. And now when they don't actually do what you need them to do, or they're not thankful or they don't appreciate it, you're like, What? Well, screw these people. I don't want to even deal with it." And this happens in life. But that progression of releasing that, of getting
Hmm.
yourself out of the main character of the story is so liberating. And what you were
Sure.
describing is kind of, you were taking yourself and prioritizing your own life and your own journey, and
Right.
you were having great success at it and enjoying it. You found the love, a great love journey. You found, like, this freedom that you hadn't seen. You let go of everything,
Right.
and then you found a piece of yourself that you had been missing.
Well, so there's a great saying in the movie Fight Club that it's only after disaster that we could be resurrected. You know, it's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything. Um, and Alex Hormozy talks about this too. I recently just saw it again. Um, that if you're starting with nothing, you have nothing to lose, and that is a really dangerous person, right? And so, if anybody is listening to your podcast that feels that way, like I have nowhere, I have nothing to lose, change that to fuck yeah, I got nothing to lose, you know. And so in this vein of people pleasing and success, there's a really interesting subset inside of this that I've discovered in the last few years, which is there are extremely wealthy people pleasers, many of whom have become clients. And and what happens is, so people pleasing and addiction, the, if I was to draw a Venn diagram for that, it would just be a circle. Like they are the same. They operate the same. It's fascinating. So, but there's always an external addiction as well, right? So whether it's alcohol or sex or porn um, or in the
Work.
case of the highly successful, it's the work, right?
Right.
If you look at a workaholic on the timeline, like if you take the timeline of a workaholic and you take the timeline of an alcoholic, the results end up the same. Now, the workaholic takes longer, right? Unless they become an alcoholic or something in that vein. But it usually ends with financial ruin, with a miserable spouse, feelings of loneliness, constant resentment. Like if you really look at what workaholism does, it functions exactly the same. You give up everything. You give up your health, you give up your money, you give up your time. And by the end of it, you're like, I didn't even live my life, right? Alcoholism was the same for me. And I've since recovered from that. But the the same thing is true in people pleasing as well. On a long enough timeline, it will take everything from you. And and they're all in the same vein. They're all based in toxic shame. It's all based in this idea that I can never be enough.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.